Jerry could have grown up to be an ordinary guy if his mom had raised him, but unfortunately, Mom wanted a girl, so Jerry barely had a chance. Jerome Henry Brudos was a devoted family man who didn't drink, didn't smoke, and used virtually no obscenities. But there was a strange secret in his life: his love for high-heeled women's shoes. Jerome Henry Brudos was born on January 31, 1939, in Webster, South Dakota. When he was born, the country hadn't yet recovered from the Great Depression. Jerome's father moved with his family to Oregon in search of a better life, but unfortunately, there were not many jobs there, so the family often had to move from place to place. At some point, Brudos managed to find a job and worked tirelessly in 2 places at the same time. The boys were at home with their mother at that time. The woman treated her sons differently. She worshipped the older Larry, but she did not like the younger Jerry. In her eyes, he was not the sweetest child. She was frustrated that her youngest son did not live up to her expectations and was not born a girl. When the boy was about 5 years old, he was already left to himself. No one was particularly involved in his upbringing. Jerry often went outside and wandered for hours through the neighborhood. One day he came across a magical thing called high-heeled shoes. His mother wore the simplest shoes with flat soles, and the boy did not even suspect that there was something more graceful and sophisticated in the world. Jerry was thrilled with his find. He took the shoes out of the garbage heap and brought them home. There he tried them on his feet and started walking around the room. His mother saw him and screamed that shoes were unsuitable for boys. She took them away and tossed them demonstratively in the trash can. The woman was angry and outraged about these shoes for a long time, and the little boy could not understand what was causing his mother such a violent reaction. Jerry waited until his mother left, then he took the shoes out of the bucket and hid them safely. He carried them around the house if no one was there. But it was not long before one caught him again. The mother screamed even louder, then she grabbed his treasure, carried it to the yard, and lit the shoes on fire. The boy watched in tears as the flames devoured his shoes. The woman constantly read him a moral lesson on how not to take things out of the garbage if you throw them away. While the fire burned, Jerry looked and experienced mixed feelings. On the one hand, dislike towards his mother. On the other hand, a strange excitement, and this terrible mixture created a very strong fetish in the guy. In 1955, when Jerry was 15 years old, a family with several teenage girls moved into the house next door. The guy came up with a new hobby: to spy on his young neighbors through the window. One day he noticed while watching washed clothes on a rope in the neighboring yard. Jerry sneaked up on them unnoticed, hiding behind the duvet, and then quietly pulled off the underwear of the women. He still looted washed clothes many times, and it got to the point that neighbors called the police and complained about missing underwear. Then, Jerry realized why the police officers came and decided to use this to his advantage. The next day, when one of the daughters was alone in the neighbor's house, Jerry knocked on their door and pretended to be a police officer. The girl had further questions about the missing underwear, of course. The girl recognized her clumsy neighbor, but she was interested in what he had come up with and decided to play with him. Jerry asked the girl to come to his house to talk about the theft. When the neighbor appeared on the porch, the guy was beside himself with overwhelming importance. He led the girl into his room and quickly jumped out the door, put on a mask, and returned in the form of a bandit with a knife in his hand. The teenager waved a gun and forced the frightened girl to undress completely. Then he took a camera and took several pictures of the unclothed neighbor in different poses. As he did not know what to do next, he just ran out the door. After taking the mask off his face, Jerry entered his room a few moments later as if nothing had happened. He told his neighbor, who hastily put on her dress, that a masked stranger had locked him in a barn. The girl was all ashamed of how stupid she was deceived, so she just ran away and never reported the attack. It was a very exciting moment for Jerome. He felt his strength in keeping his neighbor under his control. As a trophy, he also left him with authentic photos that he could look at for hours. The following situation happened in the spring of 1956. Jerry Brudos was 16 years old. He lured his classmates to a ride in his private car. The girl agreed, thinking that was a pretty final offer. She was expecting, like her neighbor, no trick of the quiet young man, Jerry Brudos, in whose soul already raged indecent fantasies, drove through the city, then drove the car to the outskirts of the city and drove into a small forest. He pulled out a knife that he had previously hidden and ordered the girl to undress under the threat of death. The classmate did not resist, but pushed the guy silently away and jumped out of the car. She could not escape, however, as Jerry immediately caught up with her and fell on them from the outside. It did not look like an attack, but after stubborn flirting, a couple who drove along the street noticed that young people were fooling around in the grass and decided to call the police in case they did not intervene themselves, as they were not sure if the girl was in danger. The officers arrived in time to arrest Jerry, and after they had previously received an arrest warrant, they searched his room. They discovered an entire collection of stolen underwear in his hiding place and several intimate photos. After finding the Polaroid photos and the Daisu of the neighbor, they immediately linked them to a theft in the neighborhood. But instead of going to jail, Brudos was taken to the Oregon Clinic for psychological examination and involuntary treatment. In conversations with the doctor, Jerry told his fantasies and innermost thoughts that regularly came up in him. The teenager told the doctor that he dreamed of having an underground room where he could hide kidnapped girls. He reported on his special love for women's shoes and looking at indecent photos. Even then, these were warning signs for the psychiatrist. But for some reason, the doctor believed that this was a teenage phase in Jerome's life, and that everything would disappear on its own as soon as the man grew up. The doctors thought the condition was not that serious, so they allowed him to attend school and then return to the clinic. After 9 months of treatment, Jerome was deemed safe for society and released. He returned back to his family and graduated from school and college as an electrician. Since he did not know what to do with himself afterward, he joined the army, but he was not destined to become a soldier. Jerry was discharged from the military after a few months because of his strange obsessions. In the end, he had to return again to the house to his mother, who was not particularly pleased about this turn of events. The woman accepted him as a stranger and brought him into a house in the backyard. Underneath it was an outbuilding that reminded a little of a garage. Over time, he was overwhelmed again by burglaries and theft of lingerie and shoes. One day, he noticed a very active woman in his sleep. He approached quietly from behind her and strangled her neck, and the woman survived but never knew who had attacked her. When Jerome was 23, he met the 17-year-old Ralphie. The young people liked each other. The girl got pregnant, and in the spring of 1992, they married. In the first years of his marriage, Jerry was incredibly happy. They moved to Portland, Oregon, and when their second child was born, Brudos's mother moved into her house to help care for her grandchildren. Ralphine married at a relatively young age, so she did not immediately pay attention to some of her husband's curiosities. For example, he often forced her to only take off her shoes with high heels and pose for photos, or he asked his wife to try on the underwear he had always brought with him from somewhere. Ralphine would later say that she had no idea that the items were stolen. Over the years, the woman became fed up with her husband's weaknesses, and she refrained from his strange photo shoots. Jerry left his fantasies unfulfilled because Ralphine no longer played with him. But then the desire came over him to find new treasures in picking up his collection. He started going out and stalking women. As Brudos was walking around the city one day, he noticed a pretty lady rushing to the bus stop. The man followed her and jumped on the bus with her. He followed the woman to the house and stayed outside to watch through the curtains. Jerry saw the woman had eaten dinner, showering, and getting ready for bed. He waited a little longer after the light in the room had gone out. Then he entered her house, crept quietly to her dresser, and began to carefully open the drawers to find underwear. At some point, Jerome pulled on the box too loudly, and the woman woke up to the noise. She saw the robber and screamed loudly. Then he rushed at her and began to squeeze her throat. As the woman became limp, it triggered a wild desire in her attacker. He took advantage of her helplessness and took possession. After he had enjoyed the quiet, supple body, he snapped. Brudos calmly took his high-heeled shoes and walked away. The woman came to her senses and reported the attack to the police, but the investigators found no evidence of who could have done this, and Jerry felt impunity. His confidence grew with each new attack. It was 1977, and Jerry was 28 years old. He was still married to Ralphine and worked as an electrician in her family's house. There was a basement where the man developed films and kept his trophies. Brudos made this room his personal dark room and prohibited his wife and children from strictly approaching the basement, let alone there. The man spent all his free time in the earth business. Between 1968 and 1969, women began to disappear in Portland. Jerry's first victim was a 19-year-old girl named Linda Slauson from Aloha. She went from door to door selling encyclopedias, and when she arrived at Brudos' house, the man worked in the garden. He expressed interest in buying and lured the girl to get his wallet. While she was looking around, he grabbed her from behind and hit her on the head and cut off the air supply to her lungs. While the girl was dying, Jerry went upstairs to his wife and children. He gave Ralphine money so she could take the children somewhere for dinner, and when he stayed home alone, he went into the basement and started to put on the girl various stolen underwear, photos, and change poses. He played with her like a giant doll, and when he had satisfied all his needs, he wanted to keep part of his performance and withdrew Linda's left leg. Jerry kept the leg in a freezer in the basement, and from time to time he took it out, put on other shoes, and rehearsed it again. That was his muse, so he called it. The evening after he waited for the family to fall asleep, he put Linda's body in the trunk of his car, grabbed an old car part, taped a load, and sank the body of the deceased into the Longton River. Linda Slauson unknowingly discovered a new way for Jerry to find pleasure. He experienced an incredible excitement through his actions. For a while, Brudos satisfied his desires and behaved like an ordinary husband and father. During this time, the family moved to Salem, where they rented a new house with a detached garage. Then Jerome made this room his workplace again. He forbade his wife and children to go there. 10 months went by until he committed his next crime in November 1968. When Brudos came home late at night, he saw a car parked on the side of the road and a girl looking confused under the hood. She was the 33-year-old Jane Whitney from McMinnville. Her car stopped, but she did not understand where the problem lay. For Jerry, this was, of course, a new opportunity to test his power over a weak woman. He volunteered to help, but told her that she first went to his workshop to get some tools. After Jerry convinced Jane that it was unsafe to be alone on the road at this time of day, he invited the girl to get into his car. The man drove into the driveway with the car and ran to get his tools. Satisfied, Jane sat down in the passenger seat and did not even suspect that her life would soon end. Jerry came back, opened the back door of the car, and before the girl had time to remember, he threw a belt around her neck. Then he dragged Jane into the garage and let his perverse imagination run free. He hung the body on a rope and did the most terrible things to her that only came to mind. Jerry kept the body in the garage for about 5 days, and only an absurd accident forced him to finally get rid of the lifeless girl. Jerry, who was in the best mood these days, decided to take his family for a weekend family outing, and while the Brudos family were not at home, there was a traffic accident near their house. The driver lost control, came off the road, and bounced directly against the wall of Jerry's garage. The arriving police quickly inspected the damage to the building. They were lighting with flashlights but did not go into the garage. The criminal was literally on the verge of being exposed. The concerned man hurriedly returned home, waiting until nightfall, and brought the body to the river to throw them away. Jerry got away with his machinations for a long time. He enjoyed hanging out in the garage or just watching attractive women and was always looking for the one who will become the next prey. Karen Sprinkler studied at Oregon University. A 19-year-old student was supposed to meet with her mother for lunch at a department store in downtown Salem on March 27, 1969. But she never appeared. Jerry sneaked up, like always, pushed the girl in the car and took her to his garage. This time, he did not immediately take her life but hung her so that Karen had to stand on tiptoes. Otherwise, she would have died. The man took some photos, enjoyed the young body, and went to the house with his family for dinner. When he came back, the girl showed no more signs of life. She could not stay in the uncomfortable position for long. To leave a memory of a successful hunt, Jerry cut Karen's chest off, painted them with bronze spray paint, and tried to make a real trophy. Then he also got rid of the corpse, threw them into the river, and complained to them with an engine block. After Brudos had tried to kidnap the women twice more, which failed, however, he decided to change the tactics. The man went into a store and bought a fake police badge. As he strolled through the parking lots of shops in Portland, he bowed the passing ladies. One day, he noticed, like a stranger with a bunch of bags, went to her car. It was the 22-year-old Linda Sallee. The young woman went to the store to look for a gift for the birthday of her friend, but in addition, bought a few different things and went to load the bags into the car. Jerry realized that this was his chance. He gave himself as a security guard, showed a police ID, and explained to Linda that there had been a number of thefts. He asked her to go to his car to immediately go to the police station and testify there. Instead of going to the police station, he took them to this unfortunate garage. He threatened them with a knife, forced them to undress, and arranged a photo shoot. Afterward, he had fun getting rid of the girl by throwing the body into the river. Linda Ropes became the last victim of Brudos, because on May 10, 1969, a lonely fisherman made the most terrible discovery of his life. Sam Wallace was looking for a fishing spot on the Longt River. On closer inspection, he discovered that it was a human body. Wallace rushed to his car and drove to a nearby gas station to call the police. The deputy sheriff of Benton County rushed to the river. She noticed streaks on the woman's neck. The body itself was tied to a heavy car gearbox with a nylon rope. The police later determined that Linda's body belonged to one of the missing girls. Donus went that there were possibly more bodies nearby and investigated the floor. 2 days later, they found the dead Ken Springer. Girls died as a result of strangulation that infected the corpses indicated that his crime obviously forgot. It was also established that the rope was in an unusual way, and that the rope was tied in an unusual way. The investigators had no idea how to approach this case, and so, given the age of the dead girls, they made their way to college and simply started interviewing female students. After the investigators had spent several days talking to college students and interviewing about 100 girls, they finally found the one which they were looking for. One of the students told of a strange guy who had been hanging around the campus for several days. One day, he started a conversation with her whose topic seemed strange to her, so the girl rushed to leave. Thanks to the description of the student, as well as the testimony of the women the suspect was trying to kidnap, the police found Jerome Brudos. They also learned that the man had been arrested at a young age for assaulting a teenager and had been taken to a hospital in Oregon. The problem was that there was no evidence linking Jerry to the crimes. An investigator expressed a desire to get to know the suspect better to find clues. He found Jerry in his garage when he opened the door. The detective noticed a rope hanging from the ceiling. As Brudos noticed the police officer's interest, he approached the rope and cut a small piece of it. He confidently said he could give him something if he liked the rope. It seems that the criminal himself gave the evidence into the hands of the policeman. But Jerry was daring like most criminals. He sincerely believed that he would never be caught. On the same day, a piece of rope was sent to a forensic expert who confirmed that the nylon cord from the garage and the cord found on the bodies trapped in the river were identical, making it possible to obtain a search warrant for Brudos's car. But when the officers reached Jerry's house, the interior of the car was completely wet. The owner of the car explained that the child had left the windows open when it was in the car wash. The investigators were very upset because all the evidence that could have been in this car was now finally destroyed. The arrival of the police still scared Jerry, and on the same day, he packed his things and made his way to the Canadian border. He was arrested on May 25, 1969. During the interrogation, Brudos, but not for long. This man liked to chat, and eventually he confessed to 4 kidnappings and the massacre of girls. He even told investigators that he tried to electrocute one of them to see what would happen. Jerry's house and garage were searched, and there were numerous photos of women, women's legs, and high-heeled shoes found. In one of the photos behind the girl was a mirror that captured the mirror image of the criminal. This was the final confirmation of the guilt of Jerry Brudos. The perpetrator received for each girl 3 consecutive life sentences. Linda Slauson's body was never found, so they couldn't blame him. Jerome Brudos was imprisoned for 37 years by Salem and died in March 2006 at the age of 67 of an incurable disease. His wife divorced him in 1970 and left the state with 2 children. Since then, she changed her name as she did not want to remember her family life and tried to protect the children.